Now, TJ is an award-winning author of mysteries and thrillers. He's an international security consultant specializing in anti-terrorism investigations and threat analysis, life experiences that drive his novels. With his former life as a government agent, um, and years as a consultant, TJ has lived and worked around the world in places like Greece, Turkey, Italy, Germany, the UK, and throughout the Americas. Again, a lot of that drives the novels and the settings in your novels. In your spare time, although I don't think you have very much of that, you're a Harley Davidson pilot, a man about dogs, and a couple cats. You love adventure, cooking, and good spirits. You were raised in New York, Hudson's Valley, and lives with your wife, labs, and cats, and a whole plethora of other. Always
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
there.
And with five kids and nine grandkids, we're not alone very often. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and okay, so I know this is completely off topic, but I've heard you do like family dinners frequently too, and everybody is there.
Oh my God! Every Sunday, I cook for between 12 and 20 people,
Wow.
and at least once a month, there's 20 or 25 there. My wife would tell you that, oh, she helps. Yeah, she opens the wine, gets the ice cubes.
I
But I
mean,
love to
that's
cook.
a
It's
big
one of
deal.
the ways yeah, I mean, I love to cook. It's one of the ways I stay sane as I am. But the kids, that's our way of making sure we see them and that we bring them together. So sometimes they're not all there, but most of the time, 90% of them are there.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's so good. Now, we are here today to talk about your newest novel, The Whisper Legacy. So, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. The Whisper Legacy is probably my favorite book of all that I've written because it is so much akin to me and my background. My previous thriller that I favored was The Consultant, but it took a lot of leaps in who the character was, Green Beret, and all this stuff, which I never was. This one is a lot closer to home. It's the
Okay.
story of Lowe, who is a down on his luck investigator and consultant in the modern world. And he was once a hotshot with the government, and he got hurt, almost killed. His entire team was almost killed. Most of them died except for two. And 15, 20 years later, he's still trying to get his legs back under him, if you will. He was blamed for the operation. He's persona non grata with any big clients, but he's been successful in getting one really important client, a guy by the name of Tommy Astor, who plays a really significant role without really knowing he plays a significant role. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is he thought all of his troubles ended on the Vula Beach Road in Greece, and they didn't. And all of his enemies thought he was dead after the Vula Beach Road, and he wasn't. Now, all of a sudden, all of this from his past is colliding in Washington. Uh, Very significant people in Washington are dying, and he's right in the middle of it. And he has no idea why. He has no idea what's going on. And all of it starts to come together about three different storylines and collides at the end of the story.
Yeah, it was a crazy story. I loved every minute of it.
Me
Um,
too.
it was a lot of fun. It definitely like before this, my favorite books were your mysteries, but this has definitely taken the stage as my favorite. So yeah, can we talk about Lowe some and how you've made him like you but not really like you?
Yeah, well, I got to be careful with that because being it just came out a few weeks ago, my kids and people that have known me for years have not finished reading it. Well, a couple of them have. They're going to raise a lot of eyebrows because Low Karen is more me than I want to admit, and only because I started having so much fun with the background of the character and the way he lives, and being down and on his luck and having to rekindle a life. I went through all that, and some of the places he's been, I went through all that, and it sort of came to roost that the more I started looking at the history of the story and putting it together, I just, I came out, and That sounds funny. Okay. I became the character more and more, and I had to actually go back and clean that up a little bit. I think there's not going to be any secrets with people that know me. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I do have to be careful because after writing the sequel and now going to be doing some others, I have to be careful that it doesn't become the TJ O'Connor story and it stays on Lowe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's something. Now, I love the mystery part of the story, especially. Now, Lowe's working outside of the law, sort of. um, but he's really just trying to, throughout the book, find out why he's being targeted, and he's kind of dodging bullets, and there are a lot of different people coming after him. So how do you balance that suspense with the humor that you have ingrained throughout every page?
Well, you've read all my other books, with
Mhm.
one exception, the Hemingway Deception. There wasn't a lot of humor in that because it was a pretty serious topic. But there was one character in that story that was the relief. Um, Anybody that knows me knows that that's the way I am. I mean, I take everything seriously, but I don't play it serious.
Yeah.
Now, my background is a former military federal agent in the terrorism world, and I've been in working in anti-terrorism since I was 20. Excuse me. We were all like that. And of all the people I know and work with, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, CIA, FBI, all these people, I think most of them will tell you that that's the way they stay sane. They have a weird sense of humor. They try to keep things light. There's a time to roll up your sleeves and get down and get dirty. But most of them all have a personality that has that outlet. For Curran, it's most important because he literally was almost killed, and he's never really recovered from the failure of it in his life. He lost the love of his life. He lost his career. He lost everything. He's living in, the top of a old barn with his landlord, and things are bad. But he keeps his perspective by being snarky, by being sarcastic. He works with law enforcement, but he's got a little bit of disdain for them.
Mhm.
Everything about him is a dichotomy between the seriousness of what he's doing and the way he copes with it. Because I think it would get really boring if I don't write James Bond, Jason Bourne characters. I don't, right? My characters are as close to real as I can get them without going over the line and being ridiculous. And that's why I balance it. There's times when Lowe is very, very serious, very, very focused. And then something happens, like there's a scene where he's being chased in his apartment building and he has to escape out the balcony. But he's in his 50s. His knees hurt. He forgets stuff. He has to use the bathroom. And he literally falls down from the second floor on what should have been in his heyday an easy climb. And as he's laying there, he sort of has a moment of, oh, what am I doing here? This is stupid. And then somebody starts shooting at him again, and he's like, okay, time to go, and he limps away. But that's where the seriousness of it collides with the snark. And other than he messes with a couple characters on purpose, most of his snark is about himself.
Yeah.
Right? He flirts with his Tommy Astor's adult daughter, but in the way he flirts, he's always putting himself down, and yet he projects that onto other people because he doesn't really take himself all that serious. He realizes that he's sort of a failure trying to work his way back, and that's why there's a balance there.
Yeah. Now he has a problem with his name.
Yeah.
And so can you tell us where he got his name and why he has a problem with that?
Well, I'm the one with the problem with it, right? So the original character's name, and I'm not going to bring up what it um, was a name I have flirted with for 5 previous attempts to write this story. And I say attempts, not that I couldn't write it, but I kept working on it. But then, I had a contract to finish another book, or then I had to go back and do the Dead Detective series. So I love that name. And the first draft went to my publisher, Level Best Books, and they loved it. They thought it was great. And this name has been around for 10 years. And then when I was doing, some marketing research, I discovered that that name was being used by somebody else in a very similar genre. And it kind of irritated me because I go back and I look at my blogs and I look at different things, and I would swear somebody just stole the name because it was a cool name, because it's too close, spelled the same and everything else. So I said, you know what? You can't prove it, move on. Well, then I decided that the character needed to have sort of a quirk to him. So Marlowe, Sam, Karen, excuse me, Curran needed to be Irish, for no other reason than I am. But Marlowe, because his mother was a fan of Humphrey Bogart and some other things. So I put some history behind the name as to why he hates Marlowe. He doesn't like being called Lowe. Just call him Karen. And yet his name is based on Sam Spade. And and he doesn't. He just it drives him nuts. But that was more of a play on the fact that I was frustrated that I lost the first character name. So one day I sat down to edit the book and I just started playing around with it until I found something that seemed to fit well. And the name Karen actually comes from a show I was watching. I love British and foreign mysteries and thrillers. And there was a sub character with that name. And I said, well, that's a cool name. I'm going to use that. And off we go.
And the dog's name is Bogart, which
Bogart,
completely.
right? Yep. Bogart. I stuck with the theme of the 40s and 50s detectives. My grandparents were amazing people, and they were big fans of that. I have a leather collection of all the old gumshoe stories, and Marlowe and Sam Spade and Raymond Chandler and all that stuff. And I wanted to keep that theme going, so I stuck with Bogart. And to Karen, and I got to say, I think I actually took it out of the story because I had to cut words. He told the story a little bit about how, he picked Bogart because it would have really irritated his mother. And I decided, yeah, that's pushing the envelope a little too much. Maybe I'll just call him Bogart and move on with it.
Oh, that's hilarious. So you do a really good job throughout all of your books, but this one especially of setting the scene. Um, I've been to the general vicinity of a lot of the places that you talk about or that you drive through, and you talk about DC and the areas around there. And you definitely pull that scenery through. Can you tell us how you go about making sure that it's authentic without being too specific?
I think all authors just, you do research. I mean, I've worked down in those areas. I go through those areas all the time. I work in DC from time to time, and I've traveled since I was 17. So certain areas just stick with me. Vula Beach Road, right? My very first terrorism mission when I went overseas, I was 24, I think, was a bombing by a terrorist group of an American busload of GIs on the Vula Beach Road. And I was the first one on the scene. I think I was only in country like 2 weeks, and the flag went up, and boom, this busload of guys got blown up. Luckily, no one was killed. But I remember it so vividly because it was the first time that I'd stepped into that world, and I was hooked, right? I was never going to go back to, drug cases or dead bodies other than terrorism. That's where I was going to stay. And then, kind of fast forward, when you read the story and he has memories of the smells and what he saw, that's all real. The villa where they protected this asset when their mission went out, that's real. I was there. I was in that villa. It's actually at the time it was owned by one of the princes of Saudi Arabia, and I don't want to go beyond that why I was in that villa, but I was. And then in the DC area and everything. Well, there's nothing worse than writing a story and taking a lot of poetic license and having some knucklehead send you an email and say, that street is a one-way street. You can't do that. And I go, you got me. Sue me, right? Except in these days, because of Amazon, they'll just send the book back and I won't make any money. So I got to be real careful with detail. And I go, if I'm not sure, I go drive it. Or in this case, for me, it's a lot easier because of my workload. I just get on Google Earth and I drive it on Google Earth and make sure I see what I see and I remember it the way I want to remember it. And those are two things, and I think most authors will do that.
And do you have a lot of trouble because in some of what you're doing, you're thinking about the past and remembering his past, but then you've got that setting which is different than what it is now.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So do you have trouble remembering, like when you're setting it in the past, do you have trouble like finding out, what it looked like or
No, no. First of all, it's ingrained in my brain. If
okay.
you've ever been involved in um, a dangerous and kind of freaky situation, you remember, right? You remember every flipping detail. In my case, I've got old video,
Yeah.
thousands of photographs, all that stuff that I took when I lived there. Um, and I know where to go online to get old copies of a newspaper, which is a Greek newspaper.
Mhm.
And I remember those things. I have photographs, um, not stuff that I'm not allowed to have. It's I lived there, so I was allowed to go around and video. I videoed that place because I was writing my very first novel out of high school there, and I'm sorry, the second novel. And I knew one day I was going to want this, so I videoed things. I got VHS tapes of all the places around Greece. I've got 35 millimeter prints and everything of all over that place, so I know what it looked like then. And in my brain, I'm about 95% accurate when I go back to the photographs.
Yeah, it's very interesting how I mean, you even talk about the smells of, dinner and what you're thinking about and the time period. Because I think it was about Easter time when he was
Yes.
on in Greece. And it was extra special because, reading it at Easter time and thinking about that, and it just made me hungry.
I would love to say that we strategically launched the book late so that it would be at Easter, but that's a lie. But let's go with that.
You did great.
And Easter in Greece is bigger than Christmas, right? And it's a huge event, and the whole country sort of shuts down. And when I lived there, my neighbors and my landlord who lived down upstairs from me was a Greek Egyptian, and what a wonderful family they were. He was an older guy, and they included me and my family in all these events. So we were into it. But then when the Vula Beach Road bombing happened, uh, that area there was Restaurant Row, and all the tavernas have outside stuff. If you ever go to a country like Greece or Turkey and anywhere in the Middle East, when you go into the restaurant areas, you can smell it for miles. And it's hard to explain other than what I wrote in the story. But I have vivid memories of being there, and I can still smell the roasting lamb and the charcoal, and hear the sounds of the waiters running out in the middle of the street and stopping people with plates of food to let them sample, to try to get them to come into the restaurants. I mean, so that's really easy. And I tend to go back to those things, as I did even in the consultant, to things that have happened, because I do have vivid memories, and those memories to me are sacred. So I love putting them in the stories where I can.
Oh, wow. It's amazing. Now, in all of your books, you have a lot of plot twists.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in this one, there were some really good ones. Now, I don't want you to talk about those specifically, but how do you keep those realistic without being a bit much?
Well, I've been accused of having too many plot twists, in all seriousness, and a couple big fans of mine who are also authors have told me that I push the envelope sometimes with too much. Other people tell me, they read all my books, they know whatever's happened in the first 250 pages is not 100% what's going to happen. So I would rather be in that camp than
Mhm.
people saying, "Oh, you got to cut back on your plot twist." Generally, there's three or four big ones and then some small stuff in there. You know, I overwrite a lot, so I can turn in 100, 105,000 words to my publisher on a thriller. I'm writing 140, 150,000, and then I cut it. So if you ever saw a first draft of mine, you would know that there's a lot more plot twists. Some of them are they're a little outrageous. So I pull those, but I give myself plenty of runway. So when I cut it back, it condenses the story down. And I'm sure somebody watching this or reading my book will say, oh, come on, that wouldn't have happened. But a lot of that stuff, when they tell me that, I go, yeah, well, guess what? It happened to me. So, nana nanny boo boo, it's real.
Yeah, no, I find it very plausible the way that it runs. It's like when things aren't going well, it's just like the next shoe drops. There's just another set of dominoes, and it's always interesting to watch your characters because I've never seen anything that is not that it isn't plausible. I mean, really. So they're
Well,
fun.
I try, and in the world that I work in, there are so. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I'm a terrorism consultant, but on a scale of what is out there, I'm a very, very, very small player. I'm not swinging out of helicopters on ropes and shooting people. I don't do that anymore. Didn't do that to begin with. But at the end of the day, some of the people that are in my camp who read my stuff in draft are former agency people, FBI, CIA. I've got several Green Berets, a Navy SEAL or two, and I ask them to read it. And I like, look, guys, you tell me if I've gone too far or not far enough. And they come up with some really good suggestions, and some that keep me out of jail for talking about something I probably shouldn't. So that's good. Thanks, guys. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to I want to be sensitive to reality, but I also want to have fun with it.
Yeah.
So there's times when some of the plot twists in Whisper are not good for the character, right? They're just not. And I don't think every plot twist and every ending needs to be 100% positive. I think you got to be realistic that with every success, there's a lot of failures that lead up to it. And as I was writing it, I was already thinking about the sequel, and I picked the sequel up, Whisper's Revenge, and that's the one I can't wait to publish because I've had so much fun with that one, and the twists and the turns are already set up for book 3. So
Wow.
now I got to be real careful because at some point, if you twist and turn too much, you end up back where you started. So I got to be careful with that.
Now, with Whisper's Revenge and the third one, is Lowe coming back?
Of course, yeah. This is going to be well. The name of the series with my publisher is The Pappa Legacies. I wasn't sure about that. They told me I gave them that name. I don't recall that, but that's okay. At the end of the day, Papa was his call sign, and I sort of kept with that because one of
He
my
loves it so much.
grandkids, yeah, she loves that name and everything, and it's going to be about his life, the things that happen around him, but he's never going to become a Jason Bourne. He's never going to become James Bond. He's going to stay in that paradigm of sort of a failure, but he's making all the right inroads. And then when he at the end of the Whisper Legacy, he gets a windfall of success and things. And then in book 2, it's gone, but gone for a really good reason. And that's probably going to be a theme where as soon as he gets ahead, something pulls him back. And that's okay because he's still making progress. A character has to advance, has to mature, and he does. But that doesn't mean his world isn't in chaos, because it is. So with Whisper's Revenge, as it implies, he's back as a target, and the target is big.
Wow. And so now I guess we'll have to wait a year for that one, right?
I would assume so. So my publisher has already signaled they want not only Revenge, but they want it as a series. They actually announced that in one of their releases, and we don't, before we even knew. Waiting on a contract. We'll see what the deliverables are. But I also have the Dead Detective case file. So I can't write 2 books in 12 months, but I probably can in a year and a half. So I'm hoping we sort of stagger them, at least until the Dead Detective case files are run its course, and then all my energy will go into Lowe.
So the Dead Detective Case Files, you have another one of those books coming out soon as well, right?
Comes out in September. In fact, I've got a note to call my publisher to say, when do we start edits? I am about halfway through book 5. In fact, I've been working on it this week, and I've already outlined book 3 of the Pappa Legacy. So I'm insane.
Oh my goodness. How do you manage keeping the full-time job and writing 2, 3 books at a time?
I'm not doing a good job of it right now. I had to take a week's vacation to get caught up because I was a couple months behind on where I wanted the novel to be. Um, I travel at least a couple weekends a month doing signings and begging for fans and trying to get people to read my books. But I take my computer with me, so if I'm sitting there and there's not a lot of people around, I'm working. The juggling is hard. My job is pretty intense, and there's a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of hard work involved, but you do what you got to do. And I love writing, so it's not work to me to take an hour and a half lunch and work on my book, or get up at 5:30 and write for a couple hours. That's not work to me. That's fun. So it's not a heavy lift to do the writing. It is a heavy lift for me to keep on track with my regular job and not let that consume me, because that's pretty important work.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I can imagine requires a lot of your focus. Um,
Oh yeah, it's definitely a focus job.
Now, you mentioned that you like doing book signings. You have a few coming up, right?
I do. This Saturday, I'm at the Winchester Book Gallery in Old Town Winchester
Hmm.
at 1 o'clock. It says 2, but I'll show up early and steal the table. The wine festival's already, is going to be going on out front door, so parking's going to be a pain, but I hope everybody shows up. I don't care. Have a glass of wine, get drunk, come in, buy some books, whatever. And then the weekend after that, I am in Mechanicsburg
Hmm.
at the Ice Cream Mysteries. And then I think I get a week off, and then the next week I'm in Gaithersburg Book Festival, one of my favorites, because there's like 10,000 people show up, and it's just a great festival. So
Yeah.
that's so far, and I've got feelers out to a dozen or more Barnes and Nobles. I'm waiting. I've already got response from 3. I've got a pretty full schedule set up.
Wow, that's amazing. And you'll do like book clubs and stuff too, don't
Oh
you?
yeah, yeah. I've got a book.
Um,
I've got 2 book clubs coming up that are private events, and I'm the guest speaker at the Handley Regional Library to their board of directors in a couple of weeks, and I think I've got 3 others that are waiting on me to open up dates later in the summer to come do. So hey, I'll talk to anybody who will let me tell them about my books and beg them to buy them.
and you have plenty of books to choose from.
I do right now. It's funny to look back and see them, sitting on my desk, but it's
Yeah.
not, it's not about them. It's about what's coming up. It's hard to stay focused right now and say, "Oh, I'm only working on the Whisper Legacy." Well, I'm not really. I'm also working over here on the Dead Detective. So it's that's the juggling, right? Is finding the time to make both of those books happy.
Yeah. Well, everybody, it was great to have you with us today. So grab your copy of The Whisper Legacy, and don't forget to grab a couple of Dead Detective books too. And we'll see TJ again soon. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you much. Y'all be safe.